of loose skin area for more heat exchange. Got big ears. When they walk, the ears kind of flap back and forth, spanning them a little bit. From the Brahman cattle, they actually got the ability to perspire as well. The mamas give birth to small calves, low birth weight. They've got very rich milk, puts on weight quickly, so birthing is easy. Southern Gertrudis cows tend to stay in production longer than other breeds of cattle. The Southern Gertrudis, the Red Angus brought the very good beef quality and good disposition into the mix. Now the Southern Gertrudis cattle are always branded with the running W at the top of the left hip. See if any of these are branded with that configuration. It's always on the left hip, and they like to not turn the left hip toward us. Okay. The branding configuration on the Southern Gertrudis is the running W. Then under that will be what's called a year brand. It'll be the last digit of the year the animal's born. So if it's got, for instance, a 08 on it, it tells us that it was born in 2008. Under that, there'll be another series of numbers called the individual number. The Santa Cruz cattle are branded with the year brand over the running W. When we do have some decent pasturage here, we also have about half our population will be what we call stockers or feeders. These are mixed breed cattle purchased by the ranch, brought in here, fed out on the grasses on the pastures until they hit about 700 to 800 pounds, at which time they are moved to the feed yard. Their job at the feed yard is to put on weight as quickly as possible, and when they get up to about 1,200 pounds, be taken to slaughter. The ranch does not have its own slaughter facility. That is done by an independent company in Corpus Christi. Under normal range conditions, which would mean if we got our 24 inches of rain a year and it fell at the right time, the ranch could sustain about 60,000 head.
Ooh, just went right over the fence. It still has huge horn.
There you go.
It's back there in the weed.
Okay. August, yeah. The ranch has not run that many head for decades. The max that they will ever do now is 46,000 head, but that would be under perfect conditions. And if we had that many, we've got a flock of sandhill cranes coming right in front of us. Two big flocks of them. About half of them would be the purebreds and half of them would be the stockers. They do have to round up the cattle to vaccinate the calves, wean the calves, brand the calves. They have to take the unproductive cows and bulls out of the herd. That work is still done on horseback.
What are those birds?
The birds that are to the left are crested parrot. There's one up on the utility pole. I like to call that a buzzard in a tuxedo. It's a carrot-eating bird. They have the same diet as the vultures. However, these birds differ in that they will hunt small rodents or reptiles. I thought these were sandhills coming in, but it looks like it's flocks of vultures. I noticed when I was coming to work this morning that there were two places where there were really good thermals for them to ride, and they were just out there just sailing around very gracefully. I think that's, kind of what's going on here. They're looking for some more thermals. Right. Roundups used to be a lot more difficult than they are now. The pasture sizes have been greatly reduced. The brush has gotten under control. And they use helicopters to help move the cattle out from the thick brush now. But it used to be with the larger pastures and thicker brush that it would necessitate the cowboys leaving their homes and being gone from them for weeks at a time during roundup. They lived in camp houses. pretty basic existence. One cold water faucet outside provided their water. No bathrooms, no electricity, open air, no air conditioning, no heating except for the fireplace. Those of you who watched the video saw a clip in there where cattle were being dipped for tick fever. I'm going to swing around here where you can see some pens that are on the left, right up that rise past the trailers. That's the original dipping vat up there. That goes back to the cattle drives of the late 1800s. Texas Longhorns were going out on these cattle drives, and they were immune to a fever that was carried by ticks. Well, the ticks would leave them and get on other cattle that were not immune, and you know what happened then. So, Mr. Clayburgh Sr. suspected that the issue was caused by ticks. The U.S. Department of Agriculture sent a group of scientists to the site of Retreatus, and the 3-year study proved that he was correct, and they developed the dipping vat. And they've been able to get tick fever pretty well under control here in the United States. It is still an issue in Mexico and Central America, so you may not be aware that part of your tax dollars go to pay for inspectors who are watching along the Texas-Mexican border for mammals that are tick-carrying to make sure that they don't come over. The gate that's on our left up here, the one that has the upright post with the chain, is called a bump gate. And that was invented by engineers from Humboldt Oil and Refining Company. The ranch leased mineral rights to that company back in the mid-1930s. And a lot of time was being wasted opening and closing gates because of the fact that Mr. Bob Clayburgh did not allow the use of cattle guards on his ranch. So if you drive up on the right side, you put your bumper on that cross piece and then accelerate enough to bump that gate open 90 degrees, and then the chain will bring it back to a close. We've got red-winged blackbirds perched in this tree up here on our left. They always like to hang out over the feed yard and get good paid, so I guess these guys are on vacation over here today. This pasture on our left will have a lot of Santa Cruz cattle in it. The lighter colored ones you can be pretty well insured.
Oh, wow, there's two. On the right.
On the right. Oh, yeah. Well, he's all by himself. They're usually in flocks. He is a big boy. Usually see several of them together.
Very pretty.
I guess he's the lone bachelor, huh?
Oh, he's gorgeous. Oh, he's gorgeous. It's hard to see in the brush.
Okay, he's going to hold his head up and look at us.
He's not black like the ones we have.
Oh, he's beautiful.
If you look out your left window, you can see on a hill a metal silo. That is where the King Ranch feed yard is located. It's not a big feed yard, 16,000 head capacity here. And they do finishing work for other ranchers, so if anyone counting cattle in there will not necessarily all be King Ranch cattle. We've got quite a variety out here. I can't tell you anything about that black one at all. I do not know unless that's one of the stockers. But the lighter colored ones are going to be the Santa Cruz. The thing is, if you go to the
Three cranes.
you people who are from Minnesota and Wisconsin, you look at our cows, they've got a pretty much of a slick hide, big ears, and they're high off the ground. Well, they don't have to worry about cold like your cows do, which have a lot of times really curly hides and small ears. The less that you can have frostbitten, the better, in other words. So I know that people are always surprised at the difference in the physiology of the cattle between hot weather cows and cold weather cows. Drive along here, we'll talk about the size of the ranch. Mr. Bob Clayburgh had a vision of taking this new breed of cattle to subtropical climates around the world. King Ranch acquired holdings in Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Cuba, Cuba, Spain, Morocco, and Australia. He died in 1974. His goal had been accomplished, so the ranch sold off those properties. The last one was dispersed in December 2001. That was Brazil. Nowadays, we've got a holding in Florida called the Big B, taking all the cattle off of it. It's now a farming operation. They grow sod, sugar cane, and citrus, sweet corn, some other vegetable crops. The ranch is in a limited partnership, citrus production. It is the fourth largest citrus producer in the world. Largest in the United States, it's in the Tropicana, Minute, all the major brands. Here in South Texas, we've got 825,000 acres. We've got also a small property up close to Gonzales where they have a sod farm and feed yard. The 825,000 acres here in South Texas is not contiguous. We are on the Santa Gertrudis division, which is the third in size. We've got cattle and horse operations here, some hunting. East of us is the Morelos division. It's the largest one at 257,000 acres. They keep about 60,000 acres of that under cultivation. They plant half of it in cotton, half in milo. We are in the planting season right now. The grain is going into the ground. It will be harvested right about the first week of July, starts the grain harvest. The cotton will be planted in a couple of weeks, and the harvest for that starts late July, early August. The King Ranch has its own gin on site. It's one of the largest cotton operations in the United States. It's all dry land farming here. When you go out to that farm, you just drive miles and miles without seeing much of anything. Some of the rows are over 3 miles long. This is called Dairy Lake. A herd of Jersey cattle used to be kept on the ranch, and the milk was distributed to the employees. Then the government came along and required that everything get pasteurized, so the ranch decided they were not in the dairy business. I've seen this lake flooded over the road here, and I've seen it completely dried up to nothing. So it's one of those things, it comes and it goes. They cleared out lots and lots of brush from it. Kind of interesting seeing the difference now. I don't know if you are aware of the fact that we are in what is called exceptional drought. That is the highest level of drought. We're about 20 inches behind in our rainfall. And one of the consequences that I'm noticing from it is that by this time of year, the prickly pear puts on its new leaves and gets ready to bloom. And this time of year going into Lent, this prickly pear bush over here on the right, those new patties are chopped up and used with scrambled eggs a lot, nopalitas. And the cactus is even in a drought mode and isn't even putting out any new patties this year, it looks like. Up ahead of us on the right is the auction arena. And I'm looking for a baby alligator over here on the left. It looks like a tire tread. Probably a cloudy, cool day like this is going to not be available for viewing. This auction arena was the site of an annual auction event held every year in October. We bring bidders from all over the world. They stopped having the auction about 25 years ago. By that time, the breed had been well established, and the cost of sponsoring the sale was exceeding the profits that they were making from it. It's used a couple times a year now. We have a ranch hand breakfast the Saturday before Thanksgiving. We had about 5,000 people show up for it this year. and then our employee rodeo in June. Someone was going to ask me a question.
Yeah, is alligator native here?
I don't know if they're native, but we have plenty of them.
Alright.
Yeah. About this time last year, one that was 11 feet, 11 and a half inches was killed over in the residential area. We were used to seeing him over here. He decided that he would crawl away, and he got into a place where he shouldn't have been, and unfortunately that was the end of him. But we used to be able to drive along and see him out in the banks. But he got over the residential area where there are small children and puppies and kitties and things like that, and there was no choice but to do it. But we had all thought he was going to measure out at 12 feet, and everybody was so disappointed that he didn't have that extra half inch on. Mr. Bob Clayburg was passionate about his thoroughbred horse racing. If you look over to the left, you see a viewing stand that he would like to sit in at the end of the day and watch his thoroughbreds practice on a racetrack on the other side of that windbreak. Our new administrative office here on the left, take a look at the facade of this building. The Spanish Mission design you're going to see repeated in a couple of other buildings that we're going to pass by. And if you'll note, when you're leaving the ranch property, the new Santa Gertrudis School across the highway also has that architecture as well. Production office here where the ranching wildlife operations are headquartered. Come up here and pull over and talk to you about some gravestones that are over on the left side of the bus. If you'll find that concrete bench and look to the left of it, there are some granite grave markers there. The marker on the far side that is closest to the stallion barn where the thoroughbred stallions were kept, that farthest grave was the grave of a thoroughbred who had an extremely difficult birth and just barely survived it. It was hard on him, hard on the mama, but they both made it through. And then he went on and had a terrible accident. He stepped on a surveyor stake, and the stake went all the way through the hoof on his right front leg. That injury became infected, and in order to save his life, they gave him massive doses of antibiotics, and they cut away about half of his hoof. The antibiotics succeeded, and he did not die from the infection, but the hoof never grew back, and he was left lame as a result of this injury. Well, he was a thoroughbred. His future had been racing. He had no future now, being lame. So orders were given to put the horse down. Somebody, however, did not carry out their task in a timely manner, and he was still around one day when some trainers took him out on the track, let him play with the other ones who were able-bodied, and much to their surprise, he took off running and he just left them in the dirt. They made the discovery that when he ran, he didn't limp. So he got a reprieve, needless to say. The ranch veterinarian created a special shoe that had a pad in it they could medicate for him, shipped him off and trained him, and in 1946, racing under the name of Assault, he won the Kentucky Derby, he won the Preakness, and he won the Belmont Stakes. Assault is only one of 11 Triple Crown winners in the history of races. He had a nickname. He was nicknamed the Club-Footed Comet because of his limp. Assault had a very successful racing career and was brought back here to get more little assaults out of him. And they made the discovery that he was sterile. So, end of that. He had a good retirement. He got tons of fan mail. And there was a lady who used to work here, and she was actually the secretary to Mr. Bob Clayburg, but if you asked her what she did, she said, "I'm Assault's secretary." She would get all fan mail for him. He died in 1971, and they gave him a funeral suitable for a champion. And before the grave was covered over, some caneos went down in the hole with him and positioned his legs in a racing stance. So today he is headed west towards the setting sun in his racing stance. The grave next to Assault's grave is a marker for his half-brother. His name was Middle Brown. Middle Brown won the Kentucky Derby in 1950. David Preakness had a muddy track, and unfortunately, middle ground wasn't what they call a mudder. He didn't know how to handle a muddy track, did not win the Preakness, but he did go on to win the Belmont Stakes that year. His head, heart, and hoofs are buried there. The other horses commemorated there are all quarter horses. There is Old Sorrel, who was the foundation sire of the King Ranch quarter horses. All these horses out here you see are descended from Old Sorrel. There is his top son, Iron Hand, who won a lot of money in cutting horse competitions. There's a mare commemorated, Miss Anita Chica. She is the only mare commemorated there. She was the favorite horse for Congressman Richard Claiborne to ride when it was roundup time. He served 7 consecutive terms in the United States Congress. He was the brother of Mr. Bob Claiborne. All those horses that I mentioned other than Assault had their heads, hearts, and hooves buried there. The last 2 markers are for Mr. Sanpepe. He was purchased by King Ranch. He was one of America's top cutting horses. And then his top son, Pepe Sandbadger, known as Little Pepe. Little Pepe died about 4 years ago. He was in the business back when they were doing a lot of artificial insemination, and he left behind over 2,300 foals. And by August of 2004, his progeny had won over $24 million in cutting horse competitions. Over here on the left, we have a big barn where the kids who are involved in 4-H and FFA can keep their projects to prepare them for the Junior Livestock Show. The barns that you see over on the right were for the thoroughbreds back in the racing days. The white building on our right was the former dairy barn where the Jersey cattle were brought twice a day to be milked, converted to storage now. We are going to be coming upon, to our right, residential area called the Colony. Each of the divisions has its own colony. Got about 100 homes in this colony. They are available to full-time employees. Those with most seniority get first option, and living in it is figured into their compensation package. Houses in the body of the colony. This one to our right was built back in 1949, and so it's a real challenge to air condition and heat it. The ones that are on the other side of the road are newer and more modern, and of course more fuel efficient homes. So they're phasing out these old 40s homes and replacing them with more suitable housing here. The kids who live out here on the ranch attend the Simon Gertrudis Independent School District, which up until 2 years ago was located right here in the secure area of the colony. But they have built a new campus, which is across Highway 141 from us. You can see it when you leave here. It is an accredited public school. Got about 130 students enrolled in it.
How many people live here?
They've got about 100 houses in here, but as they're vacated, they're not refilling them. They're just trying to phase these out. So I'm not sure exactly what the count is in here right now. I would say they might have maybe 70 houses occupied at this point, but they're just having to replace them. If there are any horses out here, yeah, the babies that I have seen have been in this pasture. This is morning nap time for the colts, though, so they're probably lying down. Now, I am mystified. We've got, it looks like black calves out there. I do not know what's going on with those black calves. Let me tell you about some weird-looking calves. Last year, they did an experiment, and I didn't know about this thing, but I drove around that loop, and there were 3 beautiful Santa Gertrudis mamas with the most beautiful, pure white Brahma calves nursing on them. They had artificially inseminated those cows with semen from the gray Brahma bulls, and they put out those beautiful white babies. Let me tell you what, No, they did embryo transplants. So they were purebred Brahma calves that were hosted by Santa Gertrudis mothers. But the mamas didn't care that they were a different color and took good care of them. Driving along here, let's talk a little bit about Mrs. King. She was the daughter of the first Protestant missionary to come to South Texas. Captain King was very profane. He was lacking formal education. He was a very heavy drinker. Got more so as he got older. But she was well educated with a college degree, a teetotaler, the daughter of a missionary, mind you. Got some more Samuel Cranes here on the right. And quite the polar opposites. They courted for 4 years. She was in fact already engaged when she met Captain King. And no doubt she had some convincing to do to convince her Presbyterian minister father that this really rough and tumble guy was a suitable match for his precious daughter. But they were married in Brownsville, and their wedding trip was a trip across the Wild Horse Desert from Brownsville to the Santa Gertrudis. Captain King hated to ride horses, always offered for a carriage ride if he could get it. Had a special carriage manufactured for their wedding trip. They were accompanied by armed outriders for their protection. Camped out each evening, and when they got to the Santa Gertrudis, her new home was that little 3-bedroom hall. Mrs. King wrote in her journal, "A finer honeymoon a young woman never had." Here on our right is the old Santa Gertrudis school. Needless to say, 130 kids couldn't fit in there. Mrs. King had worked as a teacher prior to coming to Brownsville, and she was well equipped to homeschool her own children until they were of the age to go away to boarding school. And she taught the Cananos children as well, so they just built a school to hold everybody to do all of this. Here on our right we have the service center built in 1931, Spanish mission design that we saw back at the administrative office. This is where our vehicles are serviced. We have a show barn here on our right. This barn is the only wooden structure left out here. They got away from using wood construction after losing the house to fire. Now when we come around and you can see the front of that, go back into your TV memories to Ford truck advertisements that were coming out 2 or 3 years ago. One of them had Toby Keith coming out of the double doors of that barn in his big Ford truck. And I saw some last year that just had flashes of that on it. But King Ranch and Ford do have a licensing agreement for the Ford edition, King Ranch edition of the Ford trucks. This white building on our right is the most historically significant building out here. It is the only one left from Captain King's time. This is called the commissary. He had his office downstairs. The second level was called the bachelor's wing. There was no town here until the early 1900s. And so people who were traveling across the Wild Horse Desert were always offered the hospitality of the Santa Gertrudis. And this is where they had the men who were traveling without their wives stay. The third floor was access to the roof for their guards who were kept posted on duty around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The last raid here at the Santa Gertrudis was actually 1916. Captain King died in 1885. At that point, a commissary was established on the lower level where the employees could shop. That was closed down about 25 years ago, and we've got meeting rooms and conference rooms and offices downstairs now. And the second floor is still overnight guest quarters. We'll go through the driveway of the main house now. I am not permitted to stop the bus on this part of the tour. I did see a peacock when I was eyeballing the place. Peacocks are on the grounds here. I've been ever since Mrs. King's time. They are beautiful and they are useful. They make really good watchdogs, and they're very good about keeping snakes away from the property. You can also see some cannon on the front lawn. These were actually Union Civil War surplus cannon, which Captain King purchased, mounted on his riverboats to protect from Mexican bandits. And when he got out of the shipping business, They were brought here to the Santa Gertrudis for protection of this property. On the right side of the driveway, opposite the middle set of steps, you'll see a statue of a bull mastiff. That statue was a gift to Captain King from Uriah Lott, who was a railroad promoter, worked really hard with Mrs. King to bring the railroad to South Texas. Mr. Lott was said to have the tenacity of a bulldog. When we're looking at the house, the veranda, the first part of it that we see, was not part of the original construction. So if you see an older photo of the house, it will not show this veranda. It was added on about 25 years ago. The first room to our left was the office of Mr. Clayburgh Sr. His business associates would come in through this set of double doors that we are approaching right now. The blue slate that you see at the entryway is repeated inside the house in the formal dining room. They've got the drapes parted just a little bit here in the main salon. You can look through this parting of the drapes and see the French doors on the opposite side of the room. Those French doors open out onto that courtyard that was built there for ventilation. Behind the house, there's a single-story wing, which was formerly a kitchen. The kitchen was kept separate from the house. Two reasons: to keep cooking odors out of the house and to reduce the danger of fire. And ironically, the house burned down. The kitchen was left standing intact. Nowadays, the kitchen is incorporated into the house, and this is the service wing. The tower that you see beside it has a bell on it that was originally on one of Captain King's river boats. When that wood frame house went up in flames, there was absolutely nothing to be done to save it. Soon after losing her house, Mrs. King decided that she would rebuild her home at the same site. She had very simple taste. Her only request for her new home was that it be a place that people could come in wearing their work clothes and their cowboy boots and feel comfortable. Her son-in-law, Mr. Clayburgh Sr., was overseeing the construction, and he demanded that the house be fireproof, so there's not very much wood used in its construction. The budgeted $150,000 to build and furnish the house. Tiffany's of New York did some custom windows in the interior design work, and so when the bills got settled up, it was more like $350,000. Here on our left, we have the carriage house. Stalls on the right kept the carriages. Stalls on the left kept the horses. This was built in 1909. And you'll notice the name Santa Gertrudis Ranch over it. The property was renamed King Ranch in 1934 when it was incorporated, so Captain and Mrs. King only knew this as Santa Gertrudis Ranch. As we're headed back to the Visitor Center, we'll talk about the ownership. This is a completely family-owned corporation. Captain and Mrs. King had 2 sons, 3 daughters. They hoped that their sons would follow them in the business. However, their older son, Richard II, didn't want the responsibility of managing a property this large, and he was really more interested in farming anyway. Captain King set him up on a smaller property close by. Their younger son, Robert E. Lee King, went to St. Louis, Missouri, where he attended a business college. Tragically, Lee caught pneumonia and he died there at the age of 19. Their 2 daughters named Nanny and Ella each married businessmen and settled in the St. Louis area. But their youngest daughter, Alice, returned to the Santa Gertrudis after she completed her education. Occasionally, Captain King would find himself involved in litigation, and the nearest courthouse was in Corpus Christi. There was a case that came up for trial there, in which Captain King's experienced attorneys went up against a new man in town trying his very first case in that county. That new attorney's name was Robert Justice Clayburgh, and he won the case. At the end of the day, Mr. Clayburgh was at home, trying to relax, only to be disturbed by a knock on his door, and he was somewhat taken aback when he opened the door, and there was Richard King, and he knew of Richard King's reputation, and he didn't know whether he was going to get punched out, shot, cursed out, or what. But the truth of it was that Captain King, without any preliminaries, informed Mr. Clayburgh that he was now employed by Richard King. In fact, the police got into Captain King's carriage and rode with him to the side of the trees. He was hired to do some of the legal work for the ranch. Mr. Clayburgh was a quick study. Not only did he take care of the legal work, but he also learned about ranching quickly. Laid eyes on Alice and was instantly in love, and fortunately for both of them, those feelings were reciprocated. Captain King died in 1885. He had been ill for some time. He was taken to San Antonio where he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. He died at the age of 60 in a suite at the Minter Hotel. Upon his death, Mrs. King hired Mr. Clayburgh as general manager of the ranch. And the two of them co-managed the ranch for the 40 years that she outlived Captain King. Mrs. King inherited 500,000 acres of property. She also inherited $500,000 of debt. She and Mr. Clayburgh were able to bring the ranch out of the debt situation and more than double the size of it. A year after Captain King passed away, Alice King and Robert Clayburgh were married. Mrs. King died in 1925, and she had always tried to abide by the captain's deathbed wish, which was to never part with any of the Senator troops. On her death, everything went into a trust for 10 years, and during that 10 years, inheritances were settled on some survivors. She had only one surviving child at that point, her daughter Alice. In 1935, when the trust expired, Alice King Clayburgh and her husband Robert inherited the 825,000 acres that make up today's King Ranch. In the mid-1980s, the family decided they would benefit by some outside talent for management, and at that point they brought in directors for the board who were not family members. So today's board of directors is a mixture of family and non-family members. Chairman of the board is family, the CEO is not. We're located at the corporate headquarters in Houston. Every year, all the shareholders come back and they spend a full week together, during which time they hold their annual corporate meeting, as well as summer camp activities. So every year they work together and they play together. They've been doing this for about 60 years now, and that single event is really given the credit for being the glue that's held this corporation together as a family business through so many generations. Once in a while somebody wants out, and at that event other shareholders get first right of refusal on sale of the stock, and the corporation has second right of refusal of sale. So with that system in place, it is unlikely that the shares will go outside the family. And we are back, and if anybody has any questions, I will certainly try to answer them. Anybody?
Did it all.
What time of year is the stockholders meeting?
It's in the summertime,
Okay.
in June. Anybody else?
How many cowboys do you have?
Pardon me?
How many cowboys do you have?
How many cowboys do we have? Not very many. It's less than 50, I can tell you that, because we had 50 when I started working here 12 and a half years ago, and they may be down to about 30, 35 cowboys. Anybody else?
It's the hunting of deer that is the major profit?
Deer, quail, nilgai, which is an exotic antelope from India, dove, quail, javelina, feral hog,
Turkey.
turkey. Thank you. Forgot that. So, anybody else?
So do people come in on like safaris to hunt? Is that how it
Well,
works?
not safaris. You
Yeah.
have to call ahead and book it, and it's a guided hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, one bobwhite quail is worth more than one of those cows that you saw out here.
Really?
To a rancher. And our quails, unfortunately, the population has diminished hugely due to drought, fire ants, and so forth. But one quail worth more than one cow.
Wow.
Anybody else? Okay,